Hey, Jared here. Welcome to a special episode of Eating Enlightenment. I today am being interviewed instead of me being the interviewer. So, this podcast conversation you're about to listen to was me being interviewed on Amanda's show, Savor, Food, and Body. There's links in the description down below to check those out. In this episode, I share my history of binging. I share my journey to be a lay ordained Zen priest and how I learned how to heal myself, how to be in my body without needing to escape. And the second half of the interview is where my passion for this CBT food journal, this food awareness journal, the Eating Enlightenment journal, really shines through. I am so passionate about writing. Not just writing to stop binge eating, but blogging, but expressing myself through writing down my goals, through writing down my gratitude. I just love writing. And in this second half of the conversation, I really explore obstacles that come up for people when they begin to write down their thoughts and feelings before they eat. So again, this is not a calorie journal. This is not a calorie log or anything like that. That's one of the things we talk about in the second half of the episode. The first half is just kind of my journey. And I know you're going to get a lot out of this. Pardon my rambling answers. I tend to ramble, but I think there's some really good nuggets in there. So without further ado, let's dive in.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Savor, Food, and Body. Today, we have a really great guest. We have Jared Levinson. He has a master's in counseling and is a coach and has really built his whole practice with helping people around using mindfulness to get beyond binge eating. And so I'm really excited for him to share his story with us today and some really great components that I think will be helpful to many of you. So, Jared, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, Amanda.
And yeah, I just appreciate you taking the time out of your busy work day. And if you'd like to jump in and introduce more about yourself and how you came to do this work, that would be great.
Sure. So, mindfulness, I guess the most interesting part of my story, and we'll explore this later, I'm sure, but I got into Zen Buddhism and I lived as a Zen monk for a while.
Mhm.
And so that really gave me just so much understanding of myself. It was something that was so different from my background growing up, just working out and wrestling and this whole mindfulness thing, especially for guys. Although it's getting to be more popular these days, but 12 years ago, it wasn't spoken about. Mindfulness was very kind of under the radar, and so that softer side of me, I was always like introverted and socially awkward, and kind of drawn to like nature and quieter things and philosophy and blah blah blah. So I
Mhm.
think mindfulness, it really resonated with me.
Yeah, what was that like? I hadn't thought about till just now, but coming out of from that culture of like this super masculine culture of wrestling and, when you were in high school and kind of having that reckoning with yourself of like, there is this quiet side of me. And like you said, coming to terms with mindfulness as a guy. I don't think we give enough credit to that in our culture that men can have that softer side and they can be interested in mindfulness and meditation too. What was that like for you to kind of come to that aha and jump into that?
Yeah, I think I am now very comfortable being a mindful guy and
Mhm.
much more comfortable in my skin saying I practice meditation. I'm a nerd about the Bhagavad Gita. I got statues of Buddha behind me. And I don't
Yeah.
really, anyways, I wouldn't consider myself Buddhist, but that's a conversation for another time. Anyways, back in the day, I think there was shame around mindfulness. I hid it for a long time. I remember I was working as a lifeguard, and
Mhm.
there's the pool. The lifeguard is very boring. You, for the most part, you can just sit there and watch kids swim. And I never had to have an emergency or anything like that, although my friend did.
Mhm.
But for me, it was like a 2.5 hour shift where you're sitting on the lifeguard station, very bored. And so I remember like sitting up there. I had read some Zen books, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, Three Pillars of Zen, and I was sitting up there with my back like straight up, like
Mhm.
firm posture. And I didn't tell anyone that I was meditating. Like I had my eyes open, but I was doing my breathing, I was doing my mantras. I didn't know exactly what I was doing at that time, but I remember everyone would tell me like, "Wow, your posture's like amazing up there. Like you don't, you look very engaged." I think my other lifeguards were probably like struggling to keep their eyes open, and but I was up there like like boom, like focused, and
Mhm.
but I didn't tell anyone. So I think I remember feeling like no one else is doing this. Like this is something that only I am doing. Like that's kind of weird. I remember feeling, I guess, weird about it, or at least like I kind of like it secretively, but no one else is doing it. So like I'm gonna keep this on the DL. I don't know how people are gonna react. Um, at some point that transitioned. I think just going to the monastery and people starting to hear about that, and um, but I think I was awkward about it for a long time. Um,
Yeah.
maybe it slowly, I don't know, something slowly shifted. Maybe just through therapy or whatever. Getting older, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and going to the monastery there, you were with a whole community that was
True.
doing that versus being, the high school or the adolescent that is noticing, hey, this I'm struggling with this anxiety thing and feeling socially awkward and not understanding why. And then you land in a place like the monastery and like, oh, everybody's doing this tuning in and inward work. Like I can finally take that deep breath and
Hmm.
recognize then that this is an important part of me and
Hmm.
have that really take flight.
Yeah, in the monastery, it was in California,
Mhm.
down sort of by the Bay Area, by Carmel. I mean, these were pretty normal people up there.
Mhm.
Like there were quote unquote monks, and some of them wore robes. But I remember one monk. He told me he got a divorce, or
Mhm.
everyone spoke English. This was like there was some there was even a gym up there. Not a big gym. There was just like
Mhm.
dumbbells, but it was very like familiar. It was very
Mhm.
like when I got to just be a part of that community, um, it was good. Was really stoked about it. Like to have everyone practice mindfulness, to have everyone be centered around meditating. Like there was a a schedule there. There was a you wake up around 5:30, you meditate all together, you get breakfast, you go to work. Um, but it was very normalized, and it was really nice. So that must have played a huge role in like my relationship to mindfulness, my like embrace of it, my you know
Mhm.
exploration of it. Yeah.
Yeah. How did that I know you mentioned, even in your bio online that even after you left the monastery, you still had some work to do and you were still kind of coming to terms with your binge eating, even though it had, gone by the wayside, so to speak, being in the monastery. And you learned some really sounds like some key pieces that you even use with your clients today, like when you were in the monastery and you were able to, I don't know, shall we say, take a break from binge eating because these certain things were in place for you.
Mhm.
And then it took you, as I understand it, once you got back from the monastery, you got triggered again, but then you were able to see like, okay, well, what was it about my monastery experience that allowed me to stop binge eating and what am I doing now? Can you say more about that and draw those connections for us?
Yeah, the biggest after the monastery, I learned about the dieting, basically. I learned about restriction. That was kind of in graduate school. I went to school for counseling.
Mhm.
And I think there was like a class. It was not an eating disorder class, but they mentioned eating disorders, and they mentioned this restriction, and that was a big moment. That was a big moment. Like, oh, you know, restricting and not eating carbs and working out a lot. That's gonna make me binge. That awareness was really important. Um, I did not learn that in the monastery. In the monastery, I think probably the biggest thing was the community ate together.
Mhm.
Uh, I didn't know that it was kind of, and this was in hindsight,
Mhm.
seeing the power of the community eating satisfying, fulfilling, nutrient dense meals regularly. You had to eat with other people. You couldn't go away. Um,
Right.
that was very big. I didn't see that at the time.
Mhm.
So then there were a lot of other factors, like, I mean, just being disconnected from the internet, no social media,
Mhm.
no no major stressors. I was done with school at this point. So those, between the regular eating and less stress and learning meditation, quite frankly, um, learning to be more gentle with myself, learning how to kind of step back from my thoughts and
Mhm.
they say to like watch your thoughts go by. These were like things that I learned up there. Although I was missing that restriction piece, and so I was working as a personal trainer after the monastery. I think I wanted to work as a personal trainer because um, I'd always been in the gym, and so this was like a natural step for me. And back then, and then you kind of get sucked into uh, calorie counting. You kind of get sucked into just watching what you eat, and I think I was kinder to myself. I remember, I think I matured a little bit. I think I had a bit more connections back then. I had more self care skills, but I just kind of slipped back into it. I think I started restricting, started exercising, and so I started binging again, and then um, it was sort of like a puzzle, sort of like, okay, I was more detached from it. It wasn't so I wasn't so focused on my binge eating. It wasn't as bad the second time around.
Mhm.
Um, but even when it did sort of happen, I was less involved with it. I think that was important. Um, so I hope that I know I kind of meandered, but
Yeah.
anyways, yeah.
No, and that's kind of the impression that I got too when I was reading your bio online, is that it is often is the case. Like the idea behind hindsight is 2020 is huge in so many aspects of our life. And I think it's true with our relationship with food. Like we can't always identify what type of relationship we have with food in our body when we're in the moment, when we're in that space.
Hmm.
And then it takes us, either recognizing the discomfort that we're in. So, like, okay, this, I'm uncomfortable, this sucks, I'm going to go get some help, whether that's seeing a counselor, doing a program, going to a monastery, whatever it is. And then but yet it still takes a continuous work of reflection to go, okay, well, now I've learned these skills. How does that apply to what I had been doing? Or even in your case, not even noticing that those skills kind of started to come together until afterward. Like, oh, well, I wasn't binging in the monastery because there was no restriction, and there was community, and there was no self-inflicted restriction around food. Like, this is what the food schedule is, and that's what I fell into. But and you may not, you didn't know that at the time, but then as you went through new school and you could identify that and then back into that fitness culture, which, the restriction in fitness culture just go hand in
They
hand. I
do.
mean, I was there as an athlete also. So
Mm.
yeah, just being able to connect all of those dots for yourself, looking back as hindsight's 2020, and can be so impactful to the work then that you do with people now.
I'm just reminded of a side tangent, but Steve Jobs, before he died, he had cancer, and while he had cancer, he knew he was dying. He had terminal cancer, and I he gave a speech at Stanford, right up the street. I'm in San Jose, and
Mhm.
his last speech was like it's been viewed a lot on. It's been a pretty famous speech, but because he was dying and he'd started Apple, and he was saying like you don't know how the dots connect in the moment. It's almost you only see it looking back, and to stay present and to continue being creative. I think was his overall message. Like you don't you, you know do your best each day and try to learn and try to grow, and time goes by and you kind of see how one thing you learned here like led you down this way, and that kind of you learned a different thing, and then you're down a different path. And uh I think that is very true to me. Like if you had told me
Mm.
10 years ago that I would be immersed in overeating, like I would have been very shocked. I would have been very surprised. Like, this is what I'm gonna go and do? Overeating? Like, I would have never guessed it. But you just find your way, and
Yeah, yeah, same, same. There's no way that even when I graduated from grad school, as a dietitian, and if I'm being honest, I went to grad school, first of all, to learn that nutrition edge to kind of keep me in my disordered relationship with food. And luckily, through the education, similar to your story, I went, oh, I'm doing more harm
Mm,
than I am good to myself. And so, that was part of the recovery process for me. But still,
mhm,
even when I got out, there was this level of uncertainty of, I don't know that I'm ready to do the work to help the people that I was, so to speak.
yeah,
And so if I think back, well, for me, it's more like 15, 20 years ago, the fact that I would be working with eating disorders and disordered eating with active women, I would have gone, no, because active women don't have eating disorders, right? Because I was in my own denial. So um yeah,
mm,
it's I think that's what's just so funny and ironic about hindsight's 2020. And I love what you said too about Job's speech about being present, because and I don't know if you see this with your clients, or even yourself, but when we're present and when we practice being present, we can stay in that creative
mm,
space, and we can stay in that moving forward space, even if we're not necessarily anticipating the future, but we're working on things in the moment that will help propel us forward to whatever we're going to do next.
mm,
But if we're in the space of, um, uh, of grief, a lot of my clients would experience it as grief, like grief for the body I don't have,
mm,
grief for the ability that I don't have anymore, grief for my body doesn't look like it did in this picture 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, but they're sitting in that space of reminiscing and going backwards. And when they're in that space,
mm,
they have a hard time finding the clarity in the present to move them forward to, like, okay, that was then, this is now. How do we sit in this space now so that you
mm.
don't have to sit here forever? You can move on to something else. How did that apply with your work with clients? What do you see there?
Oh man, so much is coming up for me as you as you say that. I mean, certainly, like my own therapy journey myself has been a largely attachment, working with my
Mhm,
attachments because I've had so much social awkwardness in my life and
mhm,
learning how to connect. And so when you're isolated, there's a lot of shame. So what I heard when you said grief, like, and kind of getting stuck in that grief, and what I relate to that is shame. Like it is shame hot. It's like shame for me is I've always kind of thought of it as like a tar pit where you kind of somehow slip
mhm,
in, and like if you were a dinosaur, you probably didn't see the tar pit. Otherwise, you would have walked around it. But somehow you slipped in that hole, and it's like, and you're kind of struggling, but the more you struggle, like the more tar just gets covered on you. And I can just think about like the body thoughts, how like they kind of, you have one, and then you're fighting or just struggling, and then it's like you're getting sucked in further to them, and it's not fun. But I do like what you said about being present. This is really relates, because another struggle of mine has been body disconnection. Like my family background was very logical. My my family doesn't really use emotions. Very logical, like, they use emotions, but it's a very limited bandwidth. Sad, not gonna go there. Anger, not gonna go there. Um, Anxiety, we're gonna channel that, and we're not gonna feel, right. We're gonna kind of float up in our heads, and so that's kind of like my default way, dissociation, what have you, floating. And so, when you feel something uncomfortable and there's shame, and your default tendency, for me at least, is to kind of float, to numb, to use weed or food to like not feel that shame, to not feel anxiety. um but really, the staying with the energy of that manifests in your body, with when there's an urge, um and being able to stay with it for a longer period of time, and to be creative in that moment. Like, I think when people feel that urge and they try sitting with it, it can be linked so powerfully to um, negative experiences, whether that's trauma, whether that's having tried to avoid these urges before, and having them overpower you. These urges can be very scary. Um, and so when you're scared, you start to shut down, you start to freeze, you start to panic, you start to just you're not creative, right? You're not thinking about your alternatives. You're not thinking, really. Your brain is in tunnel vision. It's harder to focus, it's harder to think. Um, and so being present and being calm and present, and being able to like sit there and sort of, be, I like the phrase creative, but think about it, and to somehow like try to play with it, to somehow
Mhm.
try to engage with it, um, to somehow ultimately let it in and let it flow through you.
Mhm.
I think that takes a lot of time and to get there, and a lot of practice, but I think that energy, learning to work with that energy, and instead of trying to like constrict, 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 and that's what most people learn, right? Because our
Right.
society teaches us to restrict and to control, right?
Mhm.
Work, to grip. But mindfulness sort of is giving you a different orientation to these cravings in the present moment, and yeah, being present is it's the way forward, right? It's the way forward. Yeah,
Right.
especially if you're grieving stuff, and
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is the foundation of meditation, of being in the present moment here. And I've been doing more thinking and reflecting around this too, and developing my Savor model of
Mm,
healing. And Savor, just in a nutshell, the acronym, it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like, we savor food because food is delicious, but then Savor also stands for stop, awareness,
mm,
validate, options, and release and reflect. And so it gives this context of, just like what you were talking about, is that you have to stop, you have to notice that you're in this space of, I'm grieving, I'm longing, I'm anxious, I'm sad, I'm all the things, and bringing awareness to, I'm all these things right now, and then validating it's okay to grieve, it's okay to be
mm,
anxious, it's okay to
mm,
be sad. And then options, what options do you have to support yourself right now? And it's okay if you don't, if you don't know which option to choose, but let's just list some options. So again, getting folks to like, let's get in our bodies, let's get out of here, out of our head, and get in our bodies and think about within this space, what are all your options that you have to go to? And food can be one of them, but it doesn't need to be the only option, because it's not going to solve all your problems. It solves the problem if you're hungry, but if you're not hungry, then you can end up with a stomach ache and you still have this emotional need that's happening. And then the reflecting and releasing. So being able to reflect back on whatever option someone chose for themselves and just learning from it. Like, did that serve you? Do you want to do it different next time? What comes up? So always that reflection piece back to, like you said, offer the movement forward. If we don't reflect in the present, I find it's really hard for us, our clients, like humans, to then move forward if we don't reflect on what we're doing. And then you after your reflection, then you release it. Like, we don't need to
Yep.
dwell on it. We did our learning, we reflected, let's go on with life and
Oh my,
let's have another learning opportunity. I'm wondering how you have this really great tool on your food awareness journal,
yeah.
and you really, your practices with clients is really centered in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And I really, I guess the Savor model is kind of around that also. I'm wondering if
Yeah, it
you
is.
can.
It is. I love your Savor model. I had just thought, it was like savor food and blah blah. I
Both.
love that. Yeah, no, it's both. It's both. It's double-edged sword or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, that's awesome. I see so many similarities there. So, okay, so sorry, so
So
CBT, right? Food journal,
yeah, so yeah,
CBT. It
yeah.
relates to, yeah, it really, where do I even start with that? It's really almost identical, sort of. Okay, so food journal, I get certified as an intuitive eating coach, and or a counselor, certified intuitive eating counselor. Um, and this is as I am beginning my counseling journey, I'm starting to see clients, and I'm trying my best to teach intuitive eating, mindfulness, etc. And I find myself ill-equipped. Um, I find myself connecting emotionally, and making friends, but not, and sort of helping, but really like not quite um, quickly enough. Seeing
Mhm.
clients, like, it was, I think it was helpful, but not quite significant enough in a short enough time period. It was too messy. It was too slow. It was too confusing. Um,
Mhm.
you know, and so I started seeing, like, hey, if someone is really struggling with binging, they're losing control over food. Um, the focus needs, like, the number one priority in the beginning to me is the stop, right? Is the stop, is the moment before a binge. Like, can you not go on autopilot?
Mhm.
Can you pause? Right? That was your next one, awareness, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so this real simple guideline, but journal with awareness before you eat. Like, it sounds simple, but it's simple enough that you can remember to do it in the moment before a binge. And maybe you can't in the beginning. I get that if there's anyone out there who tries this, they try to journal before a binge and they can't. And I don't think you need to start off with journaling before a binge, but getting in the habit of journaling before you eat, um, can kind of lead you up to journaling before a binge. No, you don't need to journal this way your entire life. But
Mhm.
in the beginning, when you're trying to stop binge eating, I found that this little guideline, um, journal before you eat, and this is not a calorie journal either, um, or a calorie log or anything like that. It's just it's the awareness, right? You journal, uh, time and place, and how you feel, what you're thinking, what your emotions, and what you feel in your body. Um, and so that's kind of the awareness piece. Um, I love the validation piece. Um, I think that's so useful too. Like, um, yeah, and then I want to pause right now. I feel like I could keep on going with these similar. Should I keep on going with the similarities between Savor and the
Yeah,
CBT thing,
or
or
even just what you use, because from my perspective on looking at your site and even the work that you've done with folks is that your food awareness journal is the tool that
yes?
you use with folks, also a cognitive behavioral therapy designed tool,
Hmm.
kind of like Savor is. And so, how does that work with clients? What does it how does it help them with that stop part? How does it
Yeah.
help them with the awareness part? Yeah, just explaining more about what that journal entails and how it seems very really effective for
Yeah, I mean,
folks.
I do. There's templates and examples and training videos. That's at eatingenlightenment.com. In a nutshell, you're not going to binge if you write. People are, in a nutshell,
Yeah.
you're not going to binge if you write how you feel down. Just very simply, if you're
Yeah.
looking for a solution and you write, if you're looking to stop binging, it the this you can hang your hat on this. You're not going to binge if you write stuff down.
Mhm.
Um, that's where it starts. That's where, you know, people get this solid, practical. This is not some sort of conceptual thing here. This is pen on paper. I do encourage pen on paper.
Absolutely.
This isn't you thinking about what you're feeling. This is you writing,
Mhm.
pen on paper, ink on, this is
Mhm.
writing. I feel,
Mhm.
I don't know what I feel, right? There's like a
Yeah.
lot of stuff comes up when people try to do this. Um, but it gives it by really putting your faith, and I do think this becomes like a spiritual practice, but by putting your faith in this little guideline, you're going to journal with awareness before you eat, before a binge. You you stop, you go with awareness.
Mhm.
Your awareness deepens into understanding why you're eating, like what's
Mhm.
going on,
Mhm.
uh, whether you haven't eaten all day, whether you're too stressed, whether there's something uncomfortable going on. Um, the reflection, the journal serves as this tool, this
Mhm.
repository of reflection as well. When you write down the time and place, you start, and maybe you don't always journal before. Maybe you miss sometimes, right? Maybe you journal afterwards because you were eating and then you realize, oh shit, I ate, I didn't record it. You write
Mhm.
down that you try to backtrack, you try to say, okay, this is the time, this is the place. And you get this record, and soon it get this record, and it's like, okay, I am binging either late at night or like in these transition moments. Transition moments are very common, but you see like, okay, this is when I'm binging. You start to see like that's what this is about. You start to see, um, that kind of goes to the R in your Saver
Mhm.
model. The reflection piece is
Mhm.
so important. I call it a growth mindset.
Mhm.
Um, like, okay, here's what I'm going to do differently next time. Um, I just find the pen on paper to be like, um, so practical. I mean, I think people who struggle with food, generally speaking, they know a lot. They know a lot of theories. They know a lot about nutrition. Um, their problem is not knowing; it's thinking. Almost, it's a
Mhm.
big problem. Is thinking. And
Mhm.
so I think people learn about intuitive eating. And don't get me wrong, I love intuitive eating. I do teach intuitive eating, but I don't start with intuitive eating. I think
Mhm.
people hear about intuitive eating, they hear about whatever, health at every size or this,
Mhm.
this anti-diet stuff or
Mhm.
but these things become just like more ideas that kind of get lodged in their head and
Mhm.
and so the practice of writing it it's tough. It is
Mhm.
tough. It is tough. I understand that it's tough. Um, it's doable and it gives you something really practical and that leads to very rapid gains. If like in your first week, if you can manage to journal before a binge, your binges are going to go down. You'll see like results very quick. And I feel like that kind of jolt, like, oh wow, I'm really making progress. It gives people so much like momentum. I think starting off this journey of healing is important. I've definitely had clients where didn't quite get off to like a we got off to a good start, but not a fast enough start where
Mhm.
they whenever you work with someone, it's a big investment. It's time and energy to get your hopes up, and then maybe like a month or two later, if things quite haven't, even if you're making progress, like
Yeah.
people just want faster results, and so I think that the journal really is a good starting place. Um, the journal leads so beautifully, so beautifully into the deeper work. Um, when you write out your thoughts, and I'll give a quick story about just something that came up recently. Um, I was asking a client, hey, I asked for permission, could I see your food journal? And I didn't see any thoughts written down, so I said, hey, like, what are you thinking in this moment? And he replied, well, like, um, when I write down, he said, I feel like this was not before a binge. He said, I feel like when I write down that I don't need to binge. He said something like that, and I was like, okay, that's an accurate thought. That is accurate. That is true. And I said, what about like, why don't you try writing down? What's stopping you from writing down before a binge? Like, what would you think before a binge? And he's like, I don't know what I'd think. And I said, well, like, probably are thinking there's not enough food at a subconscious level, right? And
Mhm.
he's like, yeah. He's like, I'm thinking that there's not enough food. I got to binge. I got to like get all this stuff now. I'm like, you need to write that out. You need to
Mhm.
write that out and see those distorted beliefs on paper. And so, once you can see these subconscious beliefs that we all have that are like guiding you, that are guiding you to binge, but you aren't really aware of them. If you can get those subconscious beliefs out on paper, um, you can. I mean, it, yeah, that's where your gravity starts to shift.
Mhm.
That's when your gravity starts to shift, and you really start getting some lasting change. That's when that's really good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I've had clients, I don't know if you've had this too, that initially they'll resist the journal. They're like, I'm not a journaler. Like what? Take the time to put pen to paper. No, that's not me. And so I tell them like, it doesn't have to be a novel. I'm not asking you to write a novel, just to write some bullet points down. I feel this. I
Mm,
feel this, and I
mm,
want to, and in your case, I want to eat this. Or, I mean, many of my clients are doing that too. But, and so getting them kind of to almost redefine too, like what does journaling mean? Because I think sometimes there's this stigma around, just kind of like there is with mindfulness. I mean, mindfulness is increasingly becoming cool, but for the people that don't identify their whole lifestyle, maybe around with like the diet culture version of mindfulness and the just right leggings and the green smoothies and all of that, then they kind of clients can lump all that stuff together, and it's not that at all. And so I've had that come up with my clients, and we kind of have to break down some of those beliefs, some of those very stereotypical beliefs, and say, no, there is really good science too that says no matter what you're working on, if you're working on your relationship with food, or you're working on moving a business forward, or your personal relationships, like when you get those thoughts
mm,
out of your head
mm,
and down, like
mm,
where you can visually see them in front of you,
mm,
things shift.
mm,
And there's science behind that that supports that. And I
mm,
agree with you too, even with having all the training in intuitive eating, and intuitive eating as a framework to help people understand the relationship with food and come back around to more of a balanced relationship with nutrition and all that. But I if it depends on the person, but I'll have people often start with the workbook, like
Mm,
the intuitive eating workbook, before like reading the textbook. And at the time, the workbook was the most updated text too for them to read. But it was more around the idea of the exercises, the activities for them to read, jog a thought, and then process that thought out by answering the
mm,
reflection prompts or doing the charts or the tables or what have you. And then we would do that, process that all in session too. But again, it was this idea of like, get out of your head, put it on the paper down below you and see what patterns come up. Like you were mentioning earlier, the other benefit of doing a journal like that is to see these patterns, seeing these patterns of, I'm thinking of one client now in particular where she doesn't take the time to nourish herself all day because she's nourishing everybody else around her.
mm,
And so then she comes home at the end of a long, crazy, busy day and it's open the refrigerator and open cupboards. And she's frustrated with binging and having not feeling well, not sleeping well because she's too full and all of this. And so for us to put together those dots of going, well, look, you haven't fed yourself in like 8 hours before you came home. And what you did feed yourself was a couple of bars and a milk or something like that, but not something that there's nothing wrong with those foods, but you may not find them nourishing day after day after day after day. Like taking the time to 10 minutes to sit your butt down and have something that is more satisfying, it changes your whole relationship with caring for yourself.
mm,
And then that can trickle out into what happens in the evening time with you and food. So she was able to, yeah, to see that all play out in her life when she,
mhm,
you do those journaling activities and the reflection activities. And then they can see, oh, yeah, the dots kind of follow like this,
mm,
and they're not a failure for how
mm.
those dots play out because sometimes it's just based on physiology too, like, well, yeah, you're eating way more in the evening time because you're freaking hungry,
Yeah.
or you're eating more in the evening time because you're super frustrated from what happened at work today. So again, not your fault. It's just your psychology asking you to tune in and say, hey, I need some TLC right now.
Yeah, I love
Is
this. I
important.
love what you're saying. I love how she's being more caring to herself as a result of seeing this stuff. I do feel that this food work is so spiritual because you become
Yeah.
through this process like a more caring person, a
Mhm.
more person towards yourself, and this is very deep transformation. Uh, Becoming a more caring person, like the essence of you changes as you learn. You become more caring, and one thing that I really like, and I'm gonna take this away with me too. I'm realizing as you speak, and I'm gonna bring this forward with me. Like that journaling is not just about food, but it's like a lifestyle. That's what I'm taking away from this right now. It's like my message I think can grow stronger if it's not just like journaling for food, like because you have a problem, but like journaling as a way of life. Like you want to journal. You want to write down your thoughts. You want to get your emotions out on paper. You want to like write out your priorities or write out your goals or write out your gratitude journaling. Like
Yeah.
you want to write stuff down.
Mhm.
Like this is like a pillar of survival in modern society, right? I mean, like
Yeah.
you gotta write. You got to. Like you're not gonna be able to thrive. I mean, look, I got a journal right here. I got
Mhm.
a journal on my desk, and like it has random notes in it, right?
Yeah.
It's got, let's see, I don't even know. It's like scribbled. Got detergent trap. This is my to-do list. But I also have like business ideas. Like I don't
Yeah.
even. It's like really sloppily written. Anyways, but it's written.
Yeah.
And
Same.
I think you could maybe use an app or something to write, but writing it down.
Well, there's something
I don't
too
know.
that I think is just more, and there are apps. In fact, the Body Love Society is putting together and about ready to release an app on intuitive eating and body positivity right now, which is awesome. It'd be another great tool.
Mm,
But I think, of course, it depends on the person. But again, going back to some of that research that's been done, when people can step away from their device and just be with themselves, a
Mm,
pen or a pencil and a piece of paper, like
mm,
we've been doing that for millennia. Like there's stuff written on caves
yeah,
from way, way back, and people were doing drawings and they were processing what was going on and their emotions and all of that. And so while I think that it might be helpful to have apps and it might keep me people more engaged, especially depending on the age of the population, but I don't think that they can completely replace that act of just sitting down with yourself and uh yeah, just putting the pen to paper and just something very organic like that, a
yeah,
very organic way of taking care of yourself.
mm,
One of the
mm,
questions before we wrap up that has come up to mind, and I can just hear some of my, listeners and clients and stuff saying, "Well, yeah, but
but
what if, what if a person," and you in a way kind of had your own experience with this, so I'm curious how this would play out for you and your thoughts on this. So if a person is, say, binging, um, not just for, an emotional connection, but say they're binging because they came from that place of restriction with food. So we'll just stick in the food realm for the moment. And so they're what I might call fuck it eating or backlash eating. Like that's why the binging is happening, from this physiological and or satisfaction perspective of like, I didn't get enough for 20 freaking years of my life. I'm getting it now. So a lot of times my clients will have this fear of, if I start paying attention and noticing and like trying to
mm,
heal from the binging, does that mean I'm going back to restricting? And if by
mm,
writing down what I'm eating, because for many of them, they were doing all kinds of crazy food journals and
yes,
the
yes,
calorie tracking crap.
uh-huh,
And
uh-huh,
so while they're uncomfortable in this fuck it eating kind of binging stage, there's a lot of fear around doing something like a food journal because it has such a negative
does,
connotation from them,
uh,
tying back to their restricting. So
mm,
even though you and I would say, like, we could see the bigger picture and say,
mm,
nah, you're not going to go back to that place. I mean,
mm,
as we have a sense of them from our clinical experience, but for them to trust, you're not likely to go back there. You have way other tools and skills that will keep you from going back to that restriction.
yeah,
But how would you approach that with
mm,
like with someone that's concerned about using the journaling, having it being triggering to their restriction again?
mm,
How would you approach that with someone if they asked?
yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It can be, it's certainly many people have, um, yeah, they've recorded food, dieting, been there, dieting is horrible, and this food journaling, this calorie recording, it can be such an essential part, of, of various programs that it seems like there's a lot of overlap. Um, I think on a cognitive level, on a surface layer, it'd be like, hey, listen, we're not writing down any calories. There's no calorie limit you even have for the day. This isn't you aren't good one day for getting under your calorie limit. You're not bad the next day if you go over it. This is about awareness. This is not about the amount of food. It's about studying your psychology around food.
Mhm.
This is about time, and even noticing time and place can help you understand your habits. uh, Encouragement to write down these thoughts and what you're feeling. I mean, tell me, did you ever write down your emotions before when you were dieting? No, like it was all about the caloric intake.
Mhm.
We're not even doing any calories. We're talking about emotions, we're talking about awareness. um, and so that's kind of the first thing I would say. But
Mhm.
I do feel that even saying that, um, there probably will still be anxiety, around starting a food journal practice,
Mhm.
um, around any sort of food thing and writing. I think this anxiety, um, you know, whether it's oftentimes people are afraid of giving up binge eating.
Mm.
There's anxiety no matter what happens when you start to seriously turn the mirror back at yourself and look at your food habits, what that means, um, what it means to you, what you're binging, what this actually means to you. Um, the anxiety is to be expected, right? Like being anxious doesn't mean you shouldn't not do something. There's going to be some anxiety.
Mm.
Um, it is sort of anxious, anxiety provoking, and this comes up too when people begin to journal. There's a lot of anxiety around their food journaling. Like, am I doing it right? And there's a lot of anxiety in this um, process. Um, so that's to be expected, and I'm still asking you to do it. um,
Right.
and to you can however you can get over that hump. There's going to be anxiety. There's, whether if science convinces you, great. There's just so much science behind cognitive behavioral therapy. There's so much science behind journaling. um, I get that science. I'm sure various diets also touted their sciences too, so why should you trust science? um, you know um, the good news about this is I think you can try it out for yourself pretty easily. I think
Mhm.
you can get a pen and paper and write out, you don't, like, for example, if you had breakfast and you had cereal, just write out cereal, 5 letters, no, six, Cereal. There's no calories. I'm not talking milk or whatever the type of cereal. Just write out cereal. Write out, approximately when you had it. Write out where you had it in your kitchen. Uh, this shouldn't take too long. This is like a minute. Write out. I like what you said. I love what you said. How you weren't the entire attitude behind this food awareness journal practice is it's different. It, like, the energy behind a calorie journal is I don't know, the energy is, I guess, scientific, sort of. When you have a calorie journal, you're trying to be a scientist. You're trying to, measure and to be neat and you know
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and this energy it's much more open. It's much more, it's forgiving because there's no punishment ever. um the entire context is different. This is a this is helping you see. I'm trying to, these words are coming to me in the moment. A food journal is helping you see. It's not anything else other than that.
Yeah, it's helping you connect the
Yeah,
dots like you
yeah.
mentioned
Mhm,
earlier.
mhm,
Yeah. Yeah, I like to think of the like you said, when the journals are connected to calories and grams and macros and all of that, it's we talk a lot about external validators. It's all about external validators, which is what diet culture is fueled on versus an awareness journal is more internal.
mm,
It's asking you to be internal of what are your thoughts, what are your emotions, and there's no there's no quantifiers to them. It just is. So then there's can be no comparison. You can't compare
yeah,
yourself from
yes.
one day to the next day.
Uh-huh,
It's just who you are in that moment versus those external validators you can have comparison with. Like, I ate this many calories, I ate this
mhm,
many macros, or I
mhm,
weighed this.
mhm.
Then you have something to compare. But with awareness, you can't dwell on
Yeah,
comparison. It
yeah,
just is what it is. It's again, it's present. It's in this moment. And when you can draw those dots of like, well, I feel this in this moment because this happened to me, no matter what happens to you the next day, you still can't compare it to the day before because now you're living in a whole different situation. So there's no comparison. So I know you have to wrap up, and I could talk with you
I
probably
love this
forever.
conversation. Oh my God. Yes, yes. I love it.
But quickly before you go, let people know where they can find you. And I think you even have, is it a free downloadable food awareness journal? And then your quiz. Tell people
Yeah.
where to find all that.
So Eating Enlightenment, it's how you spell it, Eating Enlightenment. That's the website. That's where I'm at. So on the front page, there's a journal or a download you get on the email list, and it's a folder with a template, but also an example template. I keep a food awareness journal for an entire day. There's a video of that. I would love to like put this interview up in that folder as well. It's really a resource guide on all these questions that come up when you start keeping a food journal, how to do it, all these other associations, and and also, yeah, there's one other thing too where there's like an advanced sort of thing where you work with your thoughts. I think the food journal can lead to a deeper thing. So there's like a little exercise on that. Yeah, that's at Eating Enlightenment.
.com. Okay. Super. Well, I'm so glad you were able to come
Yeah, thank you
today,
for having
and
me
it's
too.
great to have conversations. Would be great to do more of these in the future. I think you and I have a lot to say about all of this, which is
Yeah,
awesome.
I love
So
this. Cool. All right.
yeah. Thanks again, Jared. I will talk to you again soon.
Okay. Thanks,
Take
Amanda,
care.
so much. Okay. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Cool.